Hello, this is Patrick Ash, author, musician, elder millennial with the angst to go with it. And I am coming out of my cage and I've been doing just fine. Nobody ever had a dream around here, but I don't really mind that it's starting to get to me. Are we human or are we dancer? Baby, aren't we all just runaways? Because destiny is calling us. All right. Yes, the Killers. The what I would think is the kind of premier rock and roll band of the 2000s. I am a metal fan primarily. I'm also hard rock and many other genres, but metal is, if you follow me, my big thing. People often wonder why I'm into bands like U2 and The Killers, which are more mainstream and radio and pop friendly and all that. And that's a good question. I think at the end of the day, I think both of them are more of that enduring quality where they, at least not all the material, but much of their material is, I think, heartfelt and genuine, and also overlaps with kind of popular, radio friendly fare sometimes. I think some of the deep cuts for both bands are fantastic. But anyway, this is an album ranking. I'm going to cover both all the Killers studio albums. I'm also going to include the two solo Brendan Flowers albums. I've heard a little bit of the other band members, and it hasn't hooked me yet. Like maybe it will one day. People might comment and say, you should really check out so-and-so's album. I've heard some of the Dave Kooning albums. It's okay. But I did get into both of the Brendan Flowers albums, so I'm going to go ahead and include that as like this total kind of Killers plus Brendan Flowers ranking here. So I think it's a total of 10, I think 8. I'm also including the B-sides, the Sawdust album, because it is almost all original material. There's a couple covers and live versions and such, but it's mostly original stuff, so I'm gonna include that one. So I think it's a total of 10 albums. So let's start off with the way I do it is I work in I go from the bottom and work my way up. So, by the way, yeah, at least anyone that think I never get dressed up, this can be video evidence against that. So yeah, let's start on the bottom and work the way. The really interesting thing to me about this album ranking in particular, for my ranking of this band, is, for me at least, is that the bottom 3 albums and the top 3 albums are very close together. Like, it's hard for me to pick those bottom 3 and those top 3. So just know before we get into it, like, that it's a tough call for me on both sides of it. In the middle, it's pretty well, it's pretty kind of solid ranking, or my placement I feel pretty good about. Whereas with other bands, usually it's like, oh, I feel strongly about I think it's this way for many people. Like, you feel strongly about like the top album, or maybe the one at the bottom that you dislike the most. But yeah, for the Killers, it's my 3 bottom are very much my 3 bottom, the 3 top are very much the 3, and it's hard for me to pick between them in both placements. Okay, so starting on the bottom, I'm going with, and it's the one that I don't have a physical copy of because, yeah, I'm into CDs, digital or physical media, as I talk about in other videos. But yeah, the one I don't have, and that is Imploding the Mirage, which came out last year. It's a very my issue with Imploding the Mirage is that it's a very okay, like, throughout the whole album, there aren't really bad songs, but there aren't really good, like, there aren't songs that really jump out at me either. I think a couple of them were kind of cool. I didn't like the title track very much. I think Caution was decent. Yeah, it just, like, when I heard that album, I was like, all right, it's cool. It's not bad. I'll say, unlike one of the other albums I'm about to discuss, which had good songs and bad songs. But for Imploding the Mirage, none of the songs really jumped out at me as being as really classic Killers, heartfelt. I know some of it's like Brandon's personal stuff, and I think musically the absence of Dave Kooning for that album it was kind of apparent. I think they do work very well together, and so not having them on it, I think the songs just weren't quite as strong. So none of them really jumped out at me. Yeah, it just didn't do a lot for me. Maybe if I've re-listened to it a few times and I'm just like, it's okay. And that's just the way I feel about the whole thing. Not terrible, not great. So anyway, all right. So the next two is difficult because it includes their most recent album, Pressure Machine, which just came out. So I've only heard it through like twice. So it's very fresh. But I'm tempted to go ahead and put that one at the next slot up. And so we'll say Pressure Machine, their most recent album. And this, if you've heard it, and my edition, I went for the if you're a Killers fan, they have on the website, you can get signed versions. That's Brandon Flowers' signature. Hooray. This would make a great video capture, I guess. YouTube, please do so, or I'll have to manually do it. All right, so yeah. So if you want a signed copy, they're the same price as the regular CD, so go check it out. All right. But Pressure Machine, as an album, I like it. It's definitely it's very obviously Bruce Springsteen influence, like the Nebraska album and other material. And so it's like having Dave back in the band. I think the music is, I like the melodies more. And I think there's some more kind of atmospheric, just like, I feel like the music works. It's just stronger than it was on Imploding the Mirage for me. You know, and several of the songs like West Hills, The Getting By, Quiet Town, and I like Runaway For It. Like, so there's several songs on it that I think do work fairly well, and so I like it. I think it's a improvement, obviously, but it's I feel like I was talking with a friend who's also a big Killers fan. In fact, she kind of got me into him. But I feel like the concept kind of overstays its welcome, if it makes sense. I think if this album was like half the length, or maybe a third, if it was like 4 songs, maybe 5 at the most, I feel like it would have been solid, of like the best cuts of the final album. But it's just, I feel like it just really, by the end of the album, it has driven the theme into the ground. And it's been done before, like by Bruce Springsteen and other artists, that they're like, let's focus on small town America and be very literal. Like, they start off almost all the songs with little snippets from of people talking about, you know, life in this small town in Utah where Brendan grew up. So, so I mean, it's interesting, and there are, I think, genuine human moments that are inspiring, but there are not any songs that like really jump out at me, like, you know, capture my heart and soul. It's one of those, okay, this is interesting and important, and people should consider what's happening in small town America, and it's kind of like, all right, but by the end, it's like, all right, let's move on. Or do we have I feel like if it had a song or two that was more energetic, that might help carry the rest of the album and make those more somber moments, more atmospheric moments, more powerful. It's kind of like The Cure does that. I think The Cure is one of the Killers' influences. They often do that, where they'll have very morose songs next to very happy songs, and it just works. It's kind of some of the kind of miracle, I guess. Maybe I should do a Cure ranking. But yeah, so Pressure Machine is a good album. It's a solid listen. I think it probably will grow on me a little bit, but right now that's where it is. Again, these bottom 3 are close together. So with that said, let's move on up to Wonderful, Wonderful. This is the one I was referring to a few minutes ago with, it's got some great songs and it's got some not so great songs. It's a bit of both. title track does not do much for me. I'm not even a fan of like the lead single, The Man. Nope. And but there's a few others that I think are, I think some of the best lyricism is when it's personal, like where he's really speaking from the heart. And I think Rut to some degree and Life to Come are that way. I didn't love Run for Cover. I know there was another single. And then there's more of a slump in the middle of the album with several of the songs like I kind of forgettable for me, like Tyson versus Douglas, Some Kind of Love, Out of My Mind. Like I can't even like really think of them in my mind. The Calling was decent, and that had, I think, Woody Harrelson on the vocals. But then they ended with a fantastic song, and that is Have All the Songs Been Written, which it's kind of funny because like, oh, it feels that way after that slog in the middle of the album, but it's a fantastic song. I love it. I think it's among their best songs, honestly. I think Mark Knopfler from Dire Straits was on the track, and yeah, it's just great. I love that one. And but yeah, I also liked Rut and Life to Come. But for the most part, this, yeah, as I'm speaking, like maybe I should put Pressure Machine above Wonderful. It's close. Again, these bottom three are close together, but of course, there's several very, very good songs, great songs on Wonderful, Wonderful. Whereas I'm not hearing a great song off of Pressure Machine yet. Kind of like several good songs. So I guess that's why I feel this way. But yeah, those three bottom are close together. So let's move on up to, actually, we're going to go into Brandon's solo albums, starting with The Desired Effect. And the funny thing about his two solo albums are that, this is why I think the commentary, at least is interesting for me, hopefully somebody else, but with his two solo albums, I'm just going to hold both of them up right now. This one, Desired Effect, works on paper. Like if you told me he's going to make this synthy 80s album, just going all in on it, I'm like, wow, that sounds great. I can't wait to hear that. And the other one is like, well, on this other album, he's going to lean into his Vegas roots and get really kind of like poppy and a little quirky and a little, I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound particularly interesting or great, but whatever, you do you, Brandon. Like, I would be so much more interested in this album, Desired Effect, than this album, Flamingo, on paper. And yet, the lower ranking goes to Desired Effect, which I still really like. I think it has some good songs on it. I liked Between Me and You. That is a great song. That really is very heartfelt. I love it. And yeah, I love it. And there's a few other ones. Still Want You. It's obviously kind of like a relationship. It seems more kind of focused on his relationship with his wife. And Can't Deny My Love is pretty good. So a lot of like pretty solidly good songs. Not terrible, but not many of them really jump out either. But Between Me and You does. That's I love it. That's a favorite of mine. But other ones are solid. Not terrible. It just, the synthy 80s thing, like by the end of the album, kind of like with Pressure Machine, it's like, all right, kind of over that vibe. Can we shake it up a little bit? But it doesn't have any really bad songs. I think a lot of it has good melodies. He's really leaning into his keyboard chops on a few songs with like the ripping. Anyway, so yeah. My next pick is Flamingo. And again, this is an album that shouldn't work, at least for my taste, and yet it does. I was surprised. And in a way, I can't remember if I got this or if my friend who's into the Killers is like, you just have to hear it. I'm going to send it to you. So thank you if that person does hear this, because I'm pretty sure she did gift it to me. All right. So I didn't think I would like this album because like I usually am not super into like the Vegas scene or that kind of that kind of vibe that he leans into here, but a lot of it is just genuine, heartfelt, and good songwriting too. I feel like he was kind of on top of his game individually when he did this. because I love like the leads, Only the Young, that lead single. It's a fantastic song. The video is great. I think they had Cirque du Soleil for that video. I think so. Yeah, that's great. Hard Enough. That is a great heartfelt song. And then Jilted Lovers and Broken Hearts. If you relate to that song, you know. And then Playing with Fire, he has some fantastic lyrics. That was, I think, one of my first favorites from the album. It was what's it? The twist and what is it? The charcoal veins that hold this land together may twist and turn, but somewhere deep there is a heart. Oh Lord. Fantastic lyricism there. Love it. And some of the other later on the album, it's all right. I like On the Floor, I think is kind of a almost existential kind of a song. Magdalena is pretty good. I'm not crazy about Was It Something I Said? Crossfire, I think, was another single that was decent. Swallow, it's okay. But I don't know about you, but I got the version, and I recommend the version with the bonus tracks here because they are some great songs. The Clock Was Ticking. I freaking love that song. It's like, it's very bittersweet. And it leans more into the bitter than the sweet. It like kind of tells a story of like a, it's like kind of simple, hard scrabble life in a way. It's kind of like the more, it's almost like a little preview for Pressure Machine, I think, because it kind of like encapsulates that kind of small town life, I think. But there's several, speaking of great lyrics, what's it? The golden years were supposed to leave a gleam in your eye. You're starting to discover what's a great big lie. I just love some of his wordplay there. And as I mentioned, I am a author, a poet. And my book, Typical Tragedy, is a book of poetry. Lots of Leonard Cohen, but I don't know. Maybe there might be a little bit of Brennan influence here and there because I do love some of his wordplay. Jacksonville, I think, was actually a really good example of him going into the more synth pop 80s thing. Like that one. Last two tracks are okay. Came Here to Get Over You, Right Behind You. They're all right. But overall, it's just, I can't believe how well Flamingo worked. When I heard, I was skeptical. I was like, okay, he seems like he's really going hard into this Vegas life thing, and yet it still somehow works. It's a lot of great tracks on that one. So, in fact, maybe that does rival a little bit my next pick. But moving up to Sawdust, Back to the Killers. This is their B-Sides album that came out, that was a while ago now. I think it was late 2000s. But so many really, really great B-sides here. It really doesn't feel much like a B-sides album. It feels like a kind of potent album level quality. Obviously, considering I rank it above their other ones. But Tranquilize with Lou Reed, great song. I mean, it starts off just one great track after another. Shadow Play, that was one of their covers, and All the Pretty Faces. Leave the Bourbon on the Shelf, part of like the, what's it they call it, the Murder Trilogy or whatever it is, along with Jenny Was a Friend of Mine, and I think Midnight Show. Sweet Talk is a really good song. And then I'll say beyond that point, when it starts to get in the middle of the album, it's still decent, but not, they kind of start blending together. Under the Gun, Show You How, Move Away, like, they're okay. They aren't bad songs, but they don't like, those ones start to feel like B-sides as opposed to the ones early on, I think, feel strong enough to be on a proper album or an official album. Glamorous Indie Rock and Roll, Who Let You Go, they kind of feel jaunty and more fun. And then I think it kind of starts turning back around and getting to some good stuff. Like, I really love the ballad of Michael Valentine. I argue with my friend who also likes the Killers. I think she's just considers that another kind of one-off random B-side. But I love a good ballad, song that kind of takes you on a journey and goes through a few like literal like the geography of the country and kind of tells a story, and it feels like a little epic, and in just a few minutes I like it. It's got a good feel. Ruby, Don't Take Your Love to Town feels like a would-be Johnny Cash song or something. Daddy's Eyes. So those are all fine. And then the final tracks on the album, I feel like they're covers and kind of live versions, and they're all really great. I love this version of Sam's Town. I think I like the original album version of Sam's Town, but this Abbey Road version, it's I don't know, kind of bringing it down to bare basics and just letting like the melody, I don't know, it's just really, really nice. Their version of Romeo and Juliet from Dire Straits, I think they're obviously another influence given how much they come up and that Mark Knopfler played on another song, but that's of course fantastic. And then ending with that version of Mr. Brightside, that long, epic, electronic version, with credit to Jacques Lucan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I had French class, but I think I mentioned in other videos that was one of my lesser classes. I was otherwise a really good student, but that was a struggle. But this song, this version of Mr. Brightside, I love it. I feel like it's so different, and yet it works. It works as like this kind of like epic electronica take, and I love it so much so that on our wedding playlist, it was the song I picked to head off our, like we had like one playlist for like dinner and another one like to open the floor up. And that was my pick for the song to start it off because I just love it. And it still had, the cool thing about it is that it has that electronica poppy feel to it, but yet the lyrics still, it's almost even more striking, I think, emotionally. It gets in the feels of kind of those, you know, would-be relationships. Speaking of which, now this is going to be controversial because I'm getting into the top 4, right? And I kind of disagree with most of, I think, the fan base and people in general when it comes to the debut versus the other albums. So this is going to be controversial because even though my top 3 are very close together, the album that's not on them, so it is at my number 4, is the debut Hot Fuss. Many people, of course, take this to be their best album, and I obviously disagree. It's still very great. I mean, it's, again, up at number 4, but an issue I have with the Killers, like I have with Metallica, I also did Metallica ranking because, you know, I'm a metal fan. So that's kind of from my, this ranking is from that metal perspective. But the kind of comparison I'd make between Metallica and Killers is that so many purists say that their debut album, like that's the best, like that's when they were, you know, like I love the early, when people kind of, I won't say pretentious, say that like, oh, I love the early stuff. I only like the real bare beginning, like Kill 'Em All for Metallica or Hot Fuss for Killers. And in both cases, I'm like, yeah, they're both good albums, but they're both primarily hero worship. I feel like in both cases, it's not really the band at their peak because, yeah, they started strong, but it was still so much like obvious trying to sound like their influences more than themselves. And it would be one thing if it somehow still worked or they still somehow wrote their best material that way, but I don't think that's true for either band. I feel like in Metallica's case, like they needed to come into their own, and they did with Ride the Lightning, and I get into all of that in my Metallica ranking. And same thing with Killers, like it was a very strong debut and many great songs. I'm gonna go through that in a sec, but they hadn't come into their own yet. They hadn't really found their voice in my view. They were still kind of trying a little too hard to be like those UK electronica 80s band, like, you know, like New Order and Cure and some of the influences. But that being said, still some great stuff. I think starting off with Jenny Was a Friend of Mine, that bass line, Mark, I love that. It's so much fun to play when I play, can't see it, but when I play bass, I don't know if it's a tune at all. I'm not hitting the right notes at all. I probably should, like, you haven't played that a long time, Patrick. It's an awesome track. Sorry, I'm giddy, as you can tell. So I love that one in particular. And of course, Mr. Brightside, and that's their kind of go-to signature song in so many ways. It is a great song, and I struggle between, do I like the original studio version or that that remix on Sawdust. I love them both. Then some of these other ones, like they're singles, but Smile Like You Mean It, Somebody Told Me. They're good songs, but I don't think I love them as much as other people do. They're basically more of that, whether you love it or hate it, it's that Killer's radio friendly side. Somebody told me, I think I did like it when I first heard it. All These Things That I've Done, of course, is one of their classics. And then it's sort of like they start off with, it's a little front loaded, of course. I think most people know that kind of first half of the album. But I mean, I like Andy, You're a Star. That's a good theme. I like how it feels like a very deserty song, like you're living, out west. They really leaned into that feeling there. On Top is decent. Change Your Mind. Sorry, I like Believe Me, Natalie. I think is sweet. Midnight Show. Again, part of that Murder trilogy. Jenny Was a Friend of Mine, Midnight Show, and Leave the Bird by the Shuffle. Can't recall what the order is, but I think it might be reverse, maybe. Anyway, that's a really good one. Again, great bass work. I won't try to do it off the cuff anymore. That's not my strong suit, obviously. And Everything Will Be All Right ends on it still feels a little bit like they're trying to be some influence, but it's still a decent song. So go ahead if you're a Killers fan. You may downvote me or tell me I'm full of it, but Hot Fuss is at number 4 for me. So now we get in the top 3. And these 3 albums, if you've deduced, are 3 that were right next to each other. Something I call a trilogy of greatness. Whenever a band has 3 albums that happen to be their best albums, all released next to each other. All right. So as I mentioned before, these are very difficult for me to rank. They're very close together, and it's one of those, if I had to rank them, this is the way I would go. But still, all very close together. So let's go with number 3, and that is Battleborn. And this is a fantastic album. I think Brendan once said something like, oh, it didn't quite feel right, which is why we tried to do better on Wonderful, Wonderful. It's like, well, I obviously don't feel that went great, because I feel like I feel like I believe in your album more than you do. So many great, Flesh and Bone. I mean, that is such an epic intro. I think it's perhaps their most epic intro. I love that song. Runaways, of course, the lead single. And then just several singles that are great. The Way It Was, Here With Me, very heartfelt. And one of those ones that, when you have those songs that remind you of past relationships, yeah, that's good stuff. Matter of Time has a nice, powerful feel to it. Deadlines and Commitments. That's where they lean into their 80-cent thing, and it feels both like they capture it, and it doesn't feel like they're trying too hard to be their influences. It worked. I feel like that song could be like in Miami Vice or like Scarface or something. Maybe not the lyrics, but like the feel. It somehow fits. It feels Miami or Southern Florida or something. I don't know. And then of course, Miss Atomic Bomb. Holy crap, what a great song. Talk about reminding you of past relationships, that one. Yeah, suffice to say it does. And then The Rising Tide's a very good one. Heart of a Girl. Fortunately, in this case, it reminds me more of a present. I mentioned my wedding playlist. I think this one was on it. Yeah, because that was kind of came to mind when we first met and started getting together. From here on out, it's kind of a fun, jaunty song. Be Still. Damn, that's a good track. That again hits right in the feels. And then ending off with Battleborn, which I think felt or was intended to be their kind of Great Recession America, responding to that period in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. And yet we're kind of back there again economically. So it's like, and maybe that's why they did Pressure Machine to kind of use their small town experience as a microcosm of the United States. So I think that intention of a Pressure Machine was good. But anyway, I digress. Again, I did the bonus tracks for this one, but I don't feel like, unlike with Flamingo, where I feel like those bonus tracks are some of the best cuts. Like I like Carry Me Home. That's solid. I'm not crazy. Jacques Lucan. I love the Mr. Brightside version, but this version of Flesh and Bone doesn't feel right. In fact, I don't like that track at all. The original Flesh and Bone, the first track on this album, is awesome. I love it. But that remix, I am not feeling it. And then Prize Fighter, that was sort of talk about themes or leaning too much into a concept. It was, yeah. Did not love that one. So I'll almost say, like, just go ahead and get the regular album version, because it is fantastic. I really do love Battleborn. It is, I keep coming back to it. So many great songs that feel, remind you of past times and some present times. So yeah, love it. So we're up to the top two, and again, very hard to pick between them, but I'm going to go with Day and Age. This is a great album. I think it's a little bit shorter. I mean, it's 10 tracks, and most of them, I think, if not all of them, have more songs. But so many great cuts, of course. I like Losing Time. Like this, I'm gonna make a weird comparison here, but again, I'm into metal. I did a ranking of Stratovarius, the Finnish power metal band, and yes, I'm about to compare them to this, Americana pop synthy killers. My number one pick for Stratovarius, the best album of, like, I think 14 albums they had, 14 or 15 albums, was Visions, which is my favorite power metal album of all time. And it starts with Kiss of Judas, which is a great song, but just doesn't feel like a good intro. I'm kind of speaking to, like, track order and, like, what makes sense. And on that album, on Visions, it just kind of starts like do 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 do, and I'm like, okay, all right, we're starting up. Like, you have no idea you're in for one of what I would call the best power metal album of all time. So in this comparison, Losing Touch is a good song, and I like it, I dig it, but it's sort of like do 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 do, and you're just like, all right, we're starting off, and the rest of them, I almost feel like it's they should have started with Human, maybe, or even Spaceman. I don't know, just a different track. So it is a good song. And then we have Human, which is, are we human or are we dancer? I had this discussion with my killer's friend when it came out, and she's like, obviously it's dancer because that doesn't make grammatical sense. I'm like, well, I think we're starting to learn that Brennan doesn't always make grammatical sense. Apparently we are dancer. I once did an analysis between Human and Spaceman where it's actually very Nietzschean. And you might think I'm talking crazy right now, but the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, I think Human is embracing it's like disregarding Brennan's or the band's Apollonian side, the principled, virtuous, reasonable, kind of fine, upstanding citizen side, and embracing the Dionysian, the inner desire to eat, drink, and be merry, as the expression goes. For tomorrow we will die. And this might sound like crazy talk, but in Nietzsche's philosophy, one of those points is in essence, like, well, the Apollonian is this, like, principled, virtuous way of living, but what about the Dionysian? What about that more Epicurean, just live life day to day, more carpe diem, and I feel like that's what's the lyric in Human? Sorry, still getting over a bug, but pay my regrets. What's it? I'm trying to remember. Give my regards to the soul and romance. I always did the best I could. And so long to devotion. You taught me everything I know. Wave goodbye. You gotta let me go. And all of that like is in that feeling or theme of embracing that kind of free spirited, go with the flow, do what you want, kind of way of thinking. And I think on Spaceman, it kind of like takes it a step further where it feels a little bit, I don't know if it was intentional. I'm sure Bowie is one of their influences, but I think there's a little bit of that classic Space Oddity feeling. And so much of this album does feel like a Space Oddity, or just like, I think the cover itself is meant to invoke it. I have another video where I talk about the movie The Fountain, which came out, I think, a year or two before this album. And so much of the feel between that film and this album, it's uncanny the way some of it reminds of each other. Anyway, so, but on Spaceman, it's kind of like so you do go into that Dionysian realm, and then what happens? I'm trying to remember. I guess I changed my mind. What was it? But when they cut me open, I guess I changed my mind. I don't know. It's there's got a little bit of a like kind of philosophic, thoughtful thing behind it, and then you have Joyride, which is, I think, more straightforward. After that, you get into Dustland Fairy Tale. Again, so like track for track, it's like one kind of like very cool, thoughtful, and very well made songwriting is fantastic. Dustland Fairy Tale, I'm gonna go on record, is the best Killers song, flat out. A Dustland Fairy Tale, if you are a Killers fan, I never have my novel on hand, but I'm gonna run and grab it if you'll be so patient, because my novel, Upon This Pale Hill, I love it, I'm proud of it, and A Dustland Fairy Tale inspired the ending of my novel. So yeah, the protagonist is also named Brennan. That's a little more coincidental. I think I always just, when I plotted out this book many, many years ago, I think even before I was into the Killers, that was just like it just seemed like a fitting name for various reasons. It turns out Brennan means hill, which is appropriate for the title. Anyway, I think I might have originally been inspired by Brendan Lee, because I was in the Crow and all that. Anyway, but the ending of my novel was inspired by Dustland Fairy Tale. And so if you read it, I even mentioned the song because the feeling, the lyrics, I think if I understand correctly or recall correctly, Brendan wrote it about his parents. But it's like listening to that song and feeling just, it's kind of beyond words. I can't describe why I love it so much. I just love it so much. Obviously, because again, it inspired the ending of my novel. So if you're a Killers fan and you love Dustland Fairy Tale, yeah, just know that that's the inspiration for the ending of my book. So I love this song. I can't quite put it into words. This Is Your Life is another great track. I loved hearing it live. I saw them live in 2012 for the Battleborn tour, and that was great. I'm not crazy about I Can't Stay. It sounds, I think I once remarked to my friend, I was like, it sounds like it's a Goldie Hawn movie in the 80s where she's like drinking an umbrella drink on the beach, and there's, the pan drums playing. I don't know. That's the only one I'm not crazy about on this album. Neon Tiger is decent. The World We Live In, I think, is pretty nice. It's almost like a sleeper track. I keep like forgetting, like, oh yeah, this is a good one. I like it. And then it ends with Good Night, Travel Well, which is another one of their all-time greatest songs. I might even say it's number 2 or 3. I absolutely love that track. Yeah, just like with Dustland Fairy Tale, it's hard to put into words. The feeling is immense. And I mentioned The Fountain earlier. I feel like the feeling, the atmosphere, the lyrics, there's, I think, a lot of, so yeah, if you love that track, I recommend The Fountain, because there's just similar feeling there. Anyway, so again, very, very difficult for me to rank this, but I should wrap this all up. So if I had to pick a #1 Killers album, deduce it already, it would be definitive Killers, and that is Sam's Town, their second album. And I felt like they, like Metallica, doing this little comparison, this little side to side with Metallica, I feel like they came into their own with the second album. I feel like it's more who they are. I obviously they're from the American West, and there's that feel like there is on Pressure Machine, of course, but they still have some of those pop sensibilities and kind of synthy touches here and there. I liked When We Were Young. I love the title track, Sam's Town, like I mentioned with the Abbey Road version. But the album version, of course, talk about good intros. I feel like it kicks it off very effectively. When I saw them, the first time I saw them live, which was for the tour in Sam's Town, I saw them in Phoenix. It was just very, very kick-ass way to start the show. And I love Blatant Confession of a King. That's one of my personal favorites. It's just a very inspirational song. I don't know. There's something about it that's very kind of subtle, and even though it's a very driving, kind of like fist pumping kind of a feel to it. And when they did that live version on the live at Royal Albert Hall, I was like waiting for that outro, that epic outro, and then they stop. And you're like, what's happening? And it has like this interlude where he adds like these new lyrics. You gotta go listen to it if you haven't heard it, because it's really hits straight in the feels. That's all I can say. For reasons unknown, both this and Uncle Johnny, they're okay. I don't hate them, but I wouldn't say they're great songs either. And I don't know why in the world that I think that For Reasons Unknown ended up on their direct hits, which was otherwise a awesome collection. That was like the one track I'm like, why is this one here among all their other genuine greats? Read My Mind, of course, one of their all-time great songs. I think that's kind of up there with Mr. Brightside as a kind of like an anthem. Again, that's one of the songs that reminds you of like past relationships. And I'm not crazy about Uncle Johnny. Bones is very good. Like that video, I think directed by Tim Burton, was a good one. My List is, and the River is Wild. Both very good songs. And then ending with Why Do I Keep Counting, which strong lyrics, good feel. It's kind of vaguely reminiscent of Everything Will Be Alright from Hot Fuss. I even like the interlude and exitlude. It's kind of instantly brings you to that kind of feel, like the album just feels like its own world. And I feel like so many great albums are that way, where they just feel like it's their own thing, that it takes you to a certain place in time. So it's fitting that, he named this after the Sam's Town Casino. Again, I don't know Vegas. I did live in Phoenix for 2 years, so I do have some experience out west. I've also visited many times, and I do love it out there, even though I'm a North Carolinian, and I'm all about the rolling hills and the deciduous trees and my old Appalachian mountains. I also appreciate the epic American West, and I feel like the Killers really do represent them very well. So yeah, I should wrap this up. Before I do, though, I mentioned Direct Hits, which I don't have on hand, but Direct Hits has also one of my favorite Killer songs of all time. It's easily top 5, and that is Just Another Girl. I love that song. It has a lot of kind of personal relevance, and I'm just going to give a shout out there. So that was my ranking of all the Killers albums, all the the 2 Brandon Flowers albums. Maybe one day I'll look deeper. I've heard a few songs from the other solo albums, but maybe I'll look deeper. So let me know what your thoughts, your feelings, your own ranking. Probably going to be people saying, you're wrong about Hot Fuss. It's totally their best album. I feel like they hadn't come into their own yet. It's good, but there's too much hero worship. They weren't quite themselves yet, which is why I go with Sam's Town. But again, those top three are all fantastic, and those bottom three are still okay. I do like all three of them, but yeah. All right. So yeah, let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. I will see you.